Today's episode is brought to you by LaRosse Media. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think LaRosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alissa Globe, and I'm here once again with my partner in crime, Scott Hayward. How's it going, Scott?
Pretty good, Alissa. We have a new Stanley Cup champion, eh?
Oh, yeah. I saw the videos of Kessel, and that's the only reason why I know.
Since he got traded away from Toronto, he's won 3 Stanley Cups.
I mean, if he stayed, he would have won more, right?
No, I'm sure. That's the reason why Toronto hasn't won any Stanley Cups.
It is 8 in the morning here for me. Like, I am going to be a little slow. I'm either going to be really slow today or really, really fast, but no in between. So just let me know if I'm one or the other.
A woman of extremes.
Exactly. It's the only way to be.
Okay.
We have tons to talk about, so I'm going to skip the small talk because there is a lot going on in Canada right now, like a crazy amount of stuff. So let's get right
and for
into
the end
it.
of summer too, which is
I
kind
know.
of crazy, right? Like different parliaments and legislative assemblies are starting to kind of slow things down, get ready for their summer recess. This is usually when the news cycle starts to slow down. Kids are leaving school, and it's anything but, Alyssa.
Now, the first story is really fascinating to me because we've seen this debate ramp up in the States, but we have seen literally nothing in Canada, which is infuriating to parents and to a lot of people who want parental rights. And that is what's going on in New Brunswick. So just a small recap. On June 8th, New Brunswick Education Minister Bill Hogan announced the Progressive Conservative government's reform to Policy 713, which is basically the government's policy on sexual orientation in schools. So these changes would include 3 things. The first, it would no longer make it mandatory for teachers and staff to use the chosen names and pronouns of children under 16 without parental consent. The second thing is it would remove the mention of gender identity when it came to sports, and then it would also require each school to have a gender-neutral change room. So in retrospect to the whole transgender ideology debate, very tame stuff, like very tame.
Yeah.
But of course, like the Liberals are going crazy. The media is going crazy. Extreme fringe activists are going crazy. So shortly after these changes were announced, 6 PC cabinet ministers and 2 backbenchers refused to take their seats in the legislature for the morning session and issued a statement complaining of lack of process and transparency. So in response to them refusing to take their seat, Higgs called their bluff and said he was willing to call an election over the changes to this policy. And then because of that, the 8 MLAs then returned to the House for a key vote shortly after he said that. So they didn't continue to refuse to take their seats in the ledge. And then on Wednesday, Higgs said that because of the turmoil in the PC government caucus, it has him leaning towards sticking around and running in the New Brunswick election. So a lot of people are going like, are you going to step down? You know, you have disarray in your caucus. You know, some people are refusing to sit in the ledge. Like, shouldn't you just not run? And he was kind of iffing or, going back and forth prior to the changes of 713. And now that he's really getting pushed on it, he's like, I'm absolutely running. Like, we need to make sure that these changes stick. Like, something you very rarely see in conservative politicians. So it's just very refreshing. So then after that, yesterday, the Liberals put forward a motion.
Non-binding.
A non-binding motion. They debated it for 2 hours. And then after they debated it, Cabinet Minister Dorothy Shepherd resigned from Cabinet. She wrote this like handwritten note saying, Minister, I resigned from Cabinet. It was all over Twitter. And so basically the non-binding motion was to call for a full consultations by child and youth advocate Kelly Lamrock with a report due in August. Now, just to showcase who this Kelly Lamrock is, when Blaine Higgs was asked about was it being interviewed on mainstream media, they specifically said that Kelly Lamrock said that this is not an issue for people of New Brunswick and that his office had only received like 3 phone calls about it. So you know where this guy stands already. So the 6 PC MLAs voted with the Liberals on the amendment, helping it pass 26-20. So they did pass this non-binding Liberal motion because of the help of those 6 dissident cabinet ministers, and the 2 backbenchers didn't actually show up to vote. So in response to the vote, Higgs said that we can't let individual feelings in the legislature at this point overshadow the hundreds or probably thousands of parents and what is being identified as something that needs to be addressed. So, yeah, like Scott mentioned, what Lamrock decides won't be binding to the Higgs government. And, you know, he's not backing down, and it's very refreshing to see. And I, for one, am going full throttle on this. If there's an election being called, we'll make sure that, you know, as many people as humanly possible go out to vote and help him in the next election, because this is like such a huge issue. And if he's going to put his career on the line, if he's going to put his reputation on the line, like, it's important that social conservatives and conservatives in general, people who care about kids, actually ensure that he wins next election.
Yeah, and there's been some polling done on this finally in Canada. So there was one poll done, and I can't remember the polling firm, Alissa, so maybe
it was
we can
Ledger,
look that
I
up.
think.
It was Leger. Really interesting. Okay, so Leger is a pretty good polling firm. They're pretty accurate, especially when they do their polling out in Eastern Canada, of course, where New Brunswick is. And it showed that 57% agree with the Higgs policy, and that only 18% across the country disagree. So it's a very small, I wouldn't necessarily say fringe, but not far off minority in Canada that are up in arms against Blaine Higgs. Yet, you know, they have this grip on social media. They have this grip on the political professional classes in this country, including within conservative, quote unquote, conservative politics. But Blaine Higgs isn't one of them. And thankfully he isn't. And, you know, when you have those polling numbers, usually for most political parties, if they have, I remember Jason Kenney talking about this when I was an intern on the Hill. If you have 40% of the public on side, like solidly on side with you on a specific issue, then you can win on that issue, particularly at federal conservative level. So almost 60%, like between half and 2/3 of Canadians are with you on this issue, and probably growing. That means that he's onto something, right? So he's probably really, really wanting a summer election over this issue specifically. He was giving a speech yesterday in the House on the debate on the motion, and people were losing their minds because he was quoting different papers and professionals from around the world, saying that a lot of young people who are identifying that with gender dysphoria, or saying they have gender dysphoria, is a social contagion, much kind of like teen suicide was kind of in the late 90s and early 2000s. So and people were just losing their minds about just these facts.
They lose their mind, but they have no statistics to back it up. Whereas there have been a lot of professionals that aren't conservative whatsoever that have done so much research on this. For example, in Abigail Schreier's book, she wrote that in the UK, the number of girls identifying as trans has risen by over 4,000%. Like, that's an insane number. In 2016, girls accounted for 46% of sex reassignment surgeries in the US, and only 1 year later, that number spiked to 70%. And then of those 70% of trans teens, they belonged to a peer group in which one had already come out as trans, and according to parents, a third of these had shown no signs of gender dysphoria previously. And a lot of people will say, well, your parents, you know, it's because these parents are anti-trans, whatever. But of that 70%, of that number of parents, 85% of the parents surveyed about this were LGBT supportive. So this is what they've witnessed. This is what's happening. There's a lot of articles going on about how this is such a trend on TikTok. You know, you have the Dylan Mulvaney's and those types of influencers. They actually have instruction videos of how to inject yourself with testosterone. They call it tea. Like, it is absolutely a craze going on. And it's something that, you know, is being framed in a way where the parents are being villainized, and that's being done on purpose, because if parents are involved in this decision, they won't, you know, a lot of the times they'll talk to their kids and they'll see what the problems are, and, you know, the kids will obviously come out of it unfazed. But if they are separated from their parents and they're, you know, part of this glitter crew or whatever they call themselves on TikTok and on social media, that's where the parents are the enemies. The parents are going to make you suicidal. And it's just insane that that's the talking point of the Liberal Party, that they want to literally, their talking point is to separate children from their parents, because if they're not separated, your child will die, that they will commit suicide. What an insane talking point.
And this is why we see in other places like the United Kingdom, where they have made it illegal for chemical and surgical castration, and they've made it illegal for sex reassignment surgeries. They're starting to really pull back. In Sweden, their National Health and Welfare Board came out and said basically that this is a social contagion, particularly amongst, again, females, I believe, as what the report said. So that, and frankly, there hasn't been enough studies on the long-term effects of what happens when you provide puberty blockers to, young minors who are, 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. And then in certain states in the United States, you see this type of legislation. And it's also interesting because I don't think anyone, at least I hope at least, people are denying that there are people, including kids, minors, who do go through gender dysphoria. And it's something that does need to be addressed. But it's something that should be addressed, like Blaine Higgs says, with the parents involved. It's just so insane that you would go against parents. And so, of course, it's going to percolate past the province of New Brunswick. This is going to percolate up to the federal level as well. And so we're seeing a response or lack thereof at different levels. So, of course, you have the typical response from the Prime Minister. But I will say this about the Prime Minister's response. He is confident in what he says. He projects confidence when he talks about it. He has his talking points because they're grounded in a philosophy. And then I think it was as of today, this recording, I think it was a week ago, Pierre Poilievre was in Toronto. Yeah, he was at the City Hall in the city of Toronto. And he was talking about housing policy, and then he was asked a question from our good friends at the True North Center, what he thought about Policy 713 and everything that Blaine Higgs is trying to accomplish in New Brunswick. And, he kind of just shrugged away from the question and said, well, I'll just let the provinces decide their own educational policy.
Yeah, let's actually juxtapose the two, because I have the videos here. So I'm just going to play.
Let's do that.
We're just going to play the Trudeau clip and then right back to back with the Poilievre clip.
Right now, trans kids in New Brunswick are being told they don't have the right to be their true selves, that they need to ask permission. Well, trans kids need to feel safe, not targeted by politicians. We have to stand against this. We have to stand up for the freedoms we believe in and continue our work of letting love be louder than hate.
I'll let provinces make decisions about their education system.
So yeah, you can see that these clips are extremely different. So when Pierre Poilievre goes off and says he's going to fight woke, the Prime Minister is too woke and that Canadians need freedom, this is the perfect issue to go off of that. Parents need the freedom without state intervention to parent. That's what their job is. And it's crazy that the Prime Minister would talk with such passion, and Pierre can't even accurately use a single talking point about this. So they better get their act together, because this is going to have long-standing effects provincially in New Brunswick. So who is going to be the premier, and if Pierre is the Prime Minister, who he's going to be working with in the future, if that even happens. And also, it's going to trickle into by-elections that we've seen, like in Portage-Lisgar, and in other places as well, where parents actually care about that. They want to see leaders stand up like Blaine Higgs is.
And in the vacuum of conservative politics, of which Blaine Higgs is providing a big step forward, it's also starting to trickle into the federal realm as well. So even though Pierre Poilievre is silent, at least for the time being, on this issue, some of his caucus members are starting to speak out. So Dr. Leslyn Lewis, so that should be no surprise to anyone, she shared an article from the National Post, where basically saying, the National Post article column, really, it's an opinion piece, was saying that Justin Trudeau is wrong to be against parents, and saying that parents shouldn't be involved at all when it comes to this policy change for Policy 713 in New Brunswick. And she was saying, kind of tweeting, calling the Prime Minister the divider in chief, and basically how dare that he go against parents. And you're starting to see this at the grassroots level. So we saw in my hometown of Brandon, parents speak out against some probably inappropriate literature, I would say, if you can call it literature, in different elementary elementary schools. You were seeing this big time for the past couple of weeks in Ottawa. Massive protests in front of the Ottawa Carleton District School Board building, where you have a huge amount of Muslim parents, and then you have different, extreme radical left-wing commentators on, Twitter saying like, oh, they should go back home to their home countries. What a change, Alissa, from the 2015 election debates where Justin Trudeau said a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian, and now you have these people who are big Justin Trudeau fans saying, oh, well, those aren't our values, and so now they must go back. Like, this is a huge portion of the Liberal vote, particularly in the western part of the GTA. So like the 6 Mississauga ridings and going into Brampton and a little bit of Oakville and Burlington as well. So this is a huge political opportunity for the Conservatives to win the Muslim vote in the GTA and actually like flip some seats hard to their way, but they're not doing anything about it. It's really shocking.
So in the vein of those protests, like you said, they were going on in Ottawa. There have been a few. And one of the topics that we're also going to cover today is Joel Harden, who's an Ontario NDP MPP. And he was actually at one of these protests as a pro-gender ideology protester. And he posted a picture on Twitter of a little cut on his face saying that he was punched in the face by a woman at one of these protests in front of a school in Ottawa. And he said he didn't want to bring the police into it, but he did post a photo of himself. And a lot of different politicians got involved. Like Jagmeet Singh wrote on Twitter how proud he was of Joel and how trans people and kids are being targeted by angry and hateful extremists. And then the video emerged because there were multiple people there who were taking videos. And the video showed that the cut was from a protruding metal on a megaphone, so that he wasn't actually punched directly in the face. It was from a megaphone. So then when this video emerged, Joel changed his story and said that the woman punched the megaphone and then that hit his face. So then different conservative commentators got involved. Dr. Peterson said that some media are manufacturing a hate crime incident. And then Jonathan Kay said that politicians have fallen for hoaxes before. People are starting to call Joel Harden Joel Smollett after Jussie Smollett. But yeah, like you mentioned, it's interesting that in that same protest, there were tons of Muslims there, tons of Muslim parents. And there's actually a video that went viral of Muslim kids stomping on the rainbow flag because I think they've honestly just had enough of this being shoved in their face, and they're ready to speak out and they're ready to vote that way as well. And like you said, there was a liberal, very vocal liberal supporter on Twitter who said, send her home so she remembers why she came here in the first place. And this is not a sentiment that's, due to one specific extreme radical liberal, because then a video emerged right before that of an Edmonton teacher who yelled at Muslim students for skipping pride events at their school.
Well, I'll tell you, you were out to lunch. If you think it's acceptable to not show up because you think there's some pride activities going on at school, right? Oh, that's fine. Because I'm going to show my opinion by hanging out at the mall. But meanwhile, all those kids who are, involved in, say, the Gay Straight Alliance or whatever, I don't even know if we have that anymore in our school, they're here when we did Ramadan for Lion Time, and they're showing respect in the class for your religion, right? For your beliefs. It goes two ways. If you want to be respected for who you are, if you don't want to suffer prejudice for your religion, your color of skin, your whatever, then you better give it back to people who are different from you. That's how it works. It's an exchange. And it isn't like that in all countries. As I told you, in Uganda, literally, if they think you're gay, they will execute you. If you believe that kind of thing, then you don't belong here. Because that is not what Canada believes. We believe in freedom. We believe that people can marry whomever they want. That is in the law. And if you don't think that should be the law, you can't be Canadian. You don't belong here. And I mean it. I really mean it. And it's not a joke, Mansour. It's a back and forth. You want it, you got to give it. It just makes me angry. Sorry.
So it was an Edmonton teacher at Londonderry Junior High School, and she tells Muslim students who went to the mall instead of partaking in these pride events, and then one of the Muslim students recorded her, and one of her quotes was, "We believe that people can marry whoever they want. That is the law, and if you don't think that should be the law, you can't be Canadian. You don't belong here." And I mean it.
Because laws never change, right? Like, not that I'm necessarily advocating for that change per se, but like, just because something is a law now doesn't mean it has to be law forever. That's why we have parliaments. That's
And
why.
who is to decide who is Canadian or not? Like, it's
Well,
hilarious.
is it Dr. Kelly Leach, right?
Yeah,
or
exactly.
is it this teacher, right? It's just utterly ridiculous. The other thing too that's interesting about these protests is you're seeing a massive amount of students walking out on pride events, and this wasn't always the case. And I think maybe like way back in the day being 10 years ago or whatever, when it was like a day at school about like, hey, don't bully kids that aren't heterosexual, like, okay, like I don't think most people would bat an eye at that, right? But when it's like an ideology that's being shoved down the throats, and it'd be interesting to talk to people who are on the LGB side of that equation, of how far things have gotten, because I think a lot of those people are very uncomfortable where everything's going here with gender ideology now, in general, and people who do suffer from gender dysphoria, kind of making light of it and politicizing it in the worst ways possible, especially of children, and particularly young teenage girls. It's interesting to see students, like high school students, really kind of starting to step up across Canada. I don't know if we've necessarily seen this in the States, but we're definitely starting to see this in Canada, where they're walking out on that day, or they're walking out on that portion of that day from their high school because they don't want to be part of this. They don't believe in this, radical, false wokist religion. And to be honest, like I'm as a jury for myself, I'm a little bit out on it, because I'm just waiting to see, like, are they just walking out because they're walking out of class, or are they walking out because like they actually don't believe in this? And they do counter protest. So like now you have the wokest gender ideology people. It's not even like a rainbow flag. I don't even know what to call it anymore, but like their new pride flag or whatever it's called. On one side of the street or the high school front lawn, and then on the other side are people who are protesting against it. Now, a lot of the students, from what I can tell from the videos, do come from new Canadian immigrant families. A lot of them are Muslims, or they look like they might be Sikh or Hindus, from non-white Christian churches, whether they be Chaldean Catholics or Antiochian Orthodox or something like that. So it's interesting, because from a political perspective, like these are massive communities that you need on board in order to win in the ridings that matter, whether you're talking provincially in like British Columbia or Ontario, or federally as well. And we always kind of, I think a lot of conservatives, especially a lot of like red Tory conservatives, all kind of always bemoan like, oh, we don't have the youth vote. Like, it's really hard to get the youth vote. Well, here you go. You can get the youth vote. That's why all those students shared those videos about Busty Lemieux from Oakville, because they're tired of the BS, and but like they're not interested because that's an icky issue, right? So it's very interesting to see what's happening on the ground, especially toward the end of the year, and maybe because it is the end of the year this is happening, right? I mean, all this stuff starts to kind of ramp up a little bit at the beginning of May, and then of course goes all crazy in June. So I mean, that's a big part of it, but a lot of it happens throughout the year, and maybe a lot of these high school students who are in like grade 11 or grade 12 are like kind of like, screw this. Like, it's the end of the year. this has been shoved down my throat all year. Like, I am so done with this. So it's really interesting to see, Alissa, kind of the natural grassroots groundswell on this specific issue, and it's not going to stop. So those around Pierre Poilievre, like, you're going to have to get used to this, because this issue is not going away. It's just going to keep ramping up.
Yeah, and when you're opposing a party whose talking point is separate children from their parents, like, I think you can create a talking point that opposes that. Like, it's not too difficult. Yeah, I completely agree, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the upcoming election and the by-elections as well.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larosmedia.com.
And be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
I don't know if you've heard about this, or we did post about it in our group chat, but it was like barely covered at all. But the Quebec government actually canceled a pro-life event because it was being held in a government building. So I am the worst at French and French pronunciation, so this is really going to be challenging for me. My French teacher used to I used to make the whole class laugh because I just butchered it so bad. So here we go.
Are you gonna read the article in French?
No, but the Rally Feu, Foi et Liberté event, which was due to be held from June 23rd to July 2nd, was canceled last Friday by Tourism Minister Caroline Proulx. I don't know. Proulx. Claiming the event... Prue was claiming the event was anti-abortion. Because of this, she said that the event goes against the government's values and the fundamental principles of the state, could not be held in convention centers under government control. So the organizers of this, they're called Harvest Ministries International, they served formal notice to the Quebec government and the convention center, giving them until noon on Thursday to reinstate its contract, failing which it will take legal action. So this is actually now being litigated because the minister responsible for the status of women said that the government was maintaining its decision to ban the event. Now, what was interesting is that when the Quebec government first did this, all the different party leaders and all the different MNAs all clapped and were cheering and supportive. But then when it started to actually get litigated, people started waffling. So the PQ is now calling for Quebecers to take a step back and question the government's power to determine arbitrarily who can gather and express themselves. The Quebec Solidaire leader admitted the parties reacted too quickly. In the last few days, we asked ourselves a few questions. The only one who maintained their support was, shockingly, the Quebec Liberal Party interim leader. So I'm glad that they're taking a step back.
To his credit, Eric Duhaime, who is the leader of the Parti Conservateur, which unfortunately doesn't have any seats yet in the National Assembly in Quebec, he came out hard against it basically right away, as did Maxime Bernier. In fact, because Maxime Bernier is running in one of those by-elections in Portage-Lisgar, like you mentioned, Alissa, federally. I've been following his Twitter feed much closer than I usually do because of that. It's part of our job at RightNow. And that's how I became aware of this issue, because he had tweeted about it basically right away, as did Eric Duhaime, and they both came out hard against it. So good on them. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, that's just crazy that it wasn't even like a specifically pro-life event. What I assume is that this was a religious event where part of their belief system is to be pro-life. And that got canceled because it was being held in a government building, which is just nuts. Like, I mean, we already know that government is completely racist and bigoted because of the law that bans religious apparel in government buildings, but like this is just another step. So like, how much longer are Quebecers going to allow these crazies to run things in that province? Like, it is getting absolutely unmanageable basically. So hopefully this has a huge effect on them in the upcoming in the next provincial election.
Yeah, and this is Harvest Ministries International, and the guy who leads it up is Pastor Art Lucier. So, Alissa, we know Art. We've seen him at different events here and there, some pro-life events, some non-pro-life events. Interesting guy, to say the least. Like, I like Art. I think he's really easy to deal with and to work with and all that type of stuff. I mean, I could be wrong. Are there Pastor Lucier or someone else can correct us? But I'm pretty sure that he's Métis himself. And he's Francophone. And I'm pretty sure that his family does come like from the Quebecois. anyway, it's interesting to see the kind of like turn on one of their own. Now, of course, he doesn't live in Quebec. Like I don't know if he's originally from Kelowna or not, but that's where he is. But I know they've had these types of events in Quebec before, and they're basically just big prayer rallies. Like you and I've been to a couple of them. The one big one in New Brunswick leading up to the 2019 federal election campaign. So like these are like, if you go to them, like they're just praying for the country, for the health of the country, for many hours on end. And like they are pro-life, there's no doubt about it. But like at these rallies, Alyssa, like they don't really talk about it per se. They might pray for the unborn, they might pray for mothers in difficult situations, which we all should all the time anyway. So yeah, it will be interesting.
But even if it was 100% pro-life, if they were like, it is completely okay to hold these events in any building. And the government can't control and dictate and arbitrarily decide which belief systems are allowed in which buildings. Like, that's fully crazy. Like, it's just fully nuts.
The change in the reaction, and frankly, the quick change in reaction from the different party leaders is interesting. So, like, the Parti Québécois, like it typically has been more left-wing, but historically when it was founded in the late 60s, early 70s, it was a bit of an amalgamation between those who are right-wing, especially from the more separatist portions of the old Union Nationale party of Maurice Duplessis, that were gathered together under Lévesque. And then, so it's interesting. So like that's a bit interesting because of the change that the party leader had first, and then but Quebec Solidaire is way more interesting because like they're borderline Marxist. Like they are super radical left wing, like more left wing than the federal NDP or like any provincial NDP party that I'm aware of, and they even are starting to backtrack on it. So this is a great opportunity for Eric Duhaime, who I don't think is actually personally pro-life or even politically pro-life, for him to grab this issue and run with it. So, I mean, they did on the COVID-19 restrictions. They're starting to do it on the trans for kids stuff in Quebec, and now they're doing it on this issue. So, I don't know, Alyssa. It seems like there's a bit of a turn happening here. It'd be an interesting summer.
Absolutely. And then also another thing that happened in Canada in terms of the social conservative issue is that Bill C-311 was voted on a couple days ago. So as this is the Cathay Wagontall bill, the Violence Against Pregnant Women Act, which would just add strengthened, stronger sentences, give stronger sentences to criminals who attack or kill a pregnant woman. The Liberals were crazy against it, just preached their pro-abortion talking points the whole time, saying that this would give legal rights to the fetus, thus opening the door to abortion restrictions. So there was the second hour of debate on Tuesday, and then MPs voted on the bill on Wednesday.
This is, sorry, real quick. This is interesting, though. So, because we were caught off guard a little bit by this, right? Because we were thinking that the bill was supposed to come next week, so this coming week, because we're filming this on a Friday, so when you're hearing this, like this week, I guess when you're hearing it, and so I was up in Ottawa yesterday for work because I'm now back to work after my pat leave here, and I was speaking to a couple of staffers, and they're like, yeah, we were kind of caught off guard by like why Cathy's private members bill came up this week as opposed to next week.
So obvious.
Well, they had heard from other staffers. I don't know if they were OLO, Office of Leader of the Opposition, or not staffers, but other staffers, that the reason is that the Office of Leader of the Opposition wanted Cathy, I don't know if this is true or not, right? I'm just saying that this is what they heard, that the Office of the Leader of the Opposition wanted Cathy to trade her bill with a different private member's bill so that her bill would come up for debate sooner and a vote sooner so that Pierre Poilievre would have that vote and that they could campaign on that in the by-elections this weekend, because this is the last weekend and the by-elections are on Monday. So what we will see on Twitter with the different conservative candidates in those 4 by-elections, I'm sure they won't do it in Quebec, because there's one by-election there. But in the other 3, particularly in Oxford and Portage-Lisgar, I wonder if they're going to use it. And if they do use it, then you know exactly that is the reason.
Oh, 100%. And honestly, it wasn't just, staffers that you talked to. I actually watched a press conference with Liberal MP Rachel Ben-Dayan yesterday, and she said that right out. She's like, this is why we are debating this right now.
There you go.
Because of the by-election. So it was a clearly obvious move, which is funny because, like, they're trying to use this bill to court social conservatives. So they absolutely need the social conservative vote. We will be talking about the by-elections after they happen, but right now polling in Oxford is neck and neck, which is crazy. Like a rural Ontario riding, Oxford, it's been conservative for decades, and they might lose it. And we have talked about what happened in Oxford, but it makes perfect sense why he would want to court social conservatives, because so far they haven't been doing a great job.
No, not at all. And Maxime Bernier is also giving them a run for their money in Portage Liscar. Yeah. So he's talking about issues that make Pierre and those around Pierre very, very uncomfortable. So it's interesting to see the conservative candidate in Portage Liscar, because at the beginning of the when Ritz were issued about a month ago, at the beginning of the by-election campaign, when he talked about being pro-life, it was in context of, well, we don't want to expand the criteria for assisted suicide, which is a good thing, but never gave examples on abortion. And then Brandon Leslie, who I've known for years, for the past couple of weeks in multiple fora, has stated more or less that, like, hey, like, any restriction that comes forward on abortion, like, I'm going to vote for it because that's what my constituents want. Like, that is quite a change over the past 3 weeks, and that is because of Maxime Bernier. And I was wondering, like, because I was watching also, like I said earlier, I was watching Bernie's Twitter feed, like, you know, the different rallies that he's doing, how many people are there, you know, how many signs, and like the one of the criticisms I have of the People's Party of Canada is that they seem to really campaign on Twitter and not like much else in other places, and that's not really campaigning. Like, having an air war is absolutely fine, don't get me wrong, but you actually have to have people out knocking on doors and distributing literature and speaking to people and going to events. And I thought, well, I'm not really seeing that from Max's Twitter feed or like their other Twitter feeds, like the party's Twitter feed. So like, I don't understand why the Conservatives, the federal Conservatives, are so scared in Portage Liscar. And then, like you said, Alissa, late last night or late yesterday afternoon, Main Street, which does do often riding level polling, came out with some riding polls that had so in the last election, I think it was a more or less like a 50-20 split, like 50% Candice Bergen got, and then 20% Solomon Wiebe, who was the PPC candidate, got in Portage Liscar. And then this poll was showing like a 15 or 16 point gap as opposed to a 20 point gap. So it showed the PPC going from 22% to 27%. And I think it had the Conservatives dip below 50%, around 46%, right? So I guess that's closer to a 20 point gap as opposed to a 30 point gap. So, you know, and then in Oxford, it had both the Liberals and the Conservatives at 38% each. So it seems like that the left-wing vote is coalescing behind the Liberals in that riding, and that you probably have some Conservatives who are upset at what happened with the shenanigans that Jenny Byrne Company did for the nomination in that riding, just saying, screw it, I'm going to send a message to the party and I'm going to vote Liberal. Because if you look at that poll, Alyssa, it says 38% intend to vote Conservative, 38% intend to vote Liberal. But they asked them, you know, how did you vote in the 2021 election? And 45% said they voted Conservative. Yeah. So that went down 7%. The PPC vote didn't go up much. It went out by a couple points. So obviously the Liberals are picking up basically all the NDP vote, and this really pissed off Conservative vote. So, and it's a lot on these issues. Like Garrett Van Dorlen was a very strong social conservative pro-life candidate. Maxime Bernier, you know, some people call him a charlatan, don't believe what he has to say, and you know, I kind of fall into that camp from time to time, but hey, he's saying the right things, and that's more than what a lot of Conservative MPs, basically all the Conservative MPs, are doing right now. So
what I will
really
say is that
the Conservative Party into a corner.
Yeah, like the political dialogue would be much different in this country if it weren't for the PPC. Like, I'll just leave it at that. So, and I think that's a good thing. I should mention. So back to the Bill C-311. It was voted on Wednesday. It was defeated 205 to 113. So every single Conservative MP voted in favor of it, and every single NDP, Liberal, and Bloc Québécois voted against it. So just, you know, people are like, oh, how can this fail? Like, this is such a basic bill, and there should be an uproar over it. But you know, for me, we already knew that this bill was probably not going to pass because of how outspoken the Liberals were against it. But I just want to compare it to the past two other pro-life bills or similar anti-abortion sort of like, you know, pro-pregnant women bills that have happened in the last couple of years. So in 2016, There was Bill C-225, Cassie Amali's Law. It was basically the same bill as Bill C-311. It would have just given stronger sentences to those who hurt or kill a pregnant woman. Only 76 MPs voted in favor of that. In 2021, there was Bill C-233, which would have condemned sex-selective abortion. There was 82 MPs that voted in favor of that. So then you compare that with 2023 with Bill C-311, and there was 113. So we are increasing that number from Cassie Amali's Law to Bill C-311. It's almost 40 MPs, 40 votes increase, which is good. So we will continue to increase that. So as much as like it's very frustrating that this bill didn't pass, there is an increase and there is improvement and movement on this. And there will be, because that's what our job is to nominate and elect more pro-life MPs, more MPs that will vote in favor of this common sense legislation.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right, Alissa.
So we will be talking about these by-elections next week. So stay tuned for that, whether it's online, on Twitter, maybe we'll do a video. We'll definitely have a blog about it. We'll break down the numbers for you because they're very important. What happened in Oxford is very important for social conservatives. What's happening in Portage Lisgar is also important because a lot of these social issues are being discussed. And I just want to end off really quickly and mention about the new Alberta cabinet, because we have been talking about the Alberta election. Now, what was interesting about the cabinet is that former education minister and, pro-life MLA Adriana LaGrange was named Minister of Health. And she is obviously openly pro-life. It's well confirmed that she ran a pro-life organization for years prior to becoming an MLA. And so when Smith was asked about this, about a pro-life MLA getting the Minister of Health, she said that she will not be changing any laws regarding to a woman's right to choose. So again, just showing where Danielle Smith stands. And then another notable one is Dan Williams, who is now the Minister of Mental Health and Addiction. Dan is a well-known pro-life MLA, attends the March for Life, is, a family man, has a baby. So that is very good as well. A couple others I've mentioned. Nate Horner is now the Minister of Finance, and Mickey Amory is the Justice Minister. So 15 out of the 25 ministers were actually first appointed by Kenny. So there is a lot of overlap with regards to Kenny's cabinet to Danielle's.
Yeah, big cabinet too for the size of caucus that it is as well. Like, I think it's like half a caucus is in cabinet, something like that.
I am so proud of us. We just banged through these topics in 50 minutes. I think we've talked about half the topics far longer in previous episodes. So I feel like we're getting better. We're getting speedy. Let's keep it up.
No, I like doing the deep dives.
Yeah.
I like doing the deep dives. I like going off on random tangents and different rabbit holes.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have to keep this one relatively short because of our schedules for today that we have going on. And the other thing too is, we do plan on perhaps having an episode next week, depending on the results of the by-election. I mean, the results aren't interesting, then whatever. But from what we're hearing on the ground and from what the polling looks like, I don't know, Alissa. It might be a lesson for Jenny Byrne and Pierre Poilievre about how to run a political party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it will definitely be interesting. I can't wait to talk about it. I can't wait to see the results, and we'll go from there. So definitely keep an eye on our page at RightNow HQ on Instagram and Twitter, and then on Facebook it's /RightNow HQ, because we'll be talking all about it.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
And make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Stinking Albatross Podcast, so that you'll be alerted if there is a special new episode on those by-elections or other topics. You'll be alerted. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.